with Adam Kinziger. Adam Kinziger, go.
Was the president in that private dining room the whole time that the attack on the Capitol was going on? Or did he ever go to, again, only to your knowledge, to the Oval Office, to the White House Situation Room, anywhere else?
To the best of my recollection, he was always in the dining room.
Yeah, what did they say, Mr. Meadows or the president? And all, during that brief encounter that you were in the dining room? What do you recall?
I think everyone was watching the TV.
Do you know whether he was watching TV in the dining room when?
All right, folks. This is from Adam Kinziger. You didn't hear him there, but that's from his Twitter feed today, and the tweet is, "What was he doing while the Capitol was under siege?" Question mark. See for yourself. Donald Trump is a disgrace. That's from Adam Kinziger. As you know, they are having supposedly their last hearing tonight in prime time. We will be live streaming it. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you go over and subscribe to our Rumble channel, you will get that live stream. Welcome to GAMcast. I hope I don't sound too bad, but I'm guessing that you can tell from my voice that I have a cold, and a pretty bad one at that. So anyway, hopefully it won't impact the show too bad. Luckily, it's a slow news day, so we don't have to go very long today to get you all caught up to speed. We're going to talk about January 6th. We're going to update you on the Steve Bannon trial. It's a little bit of a spoiler. The defense has rested yesterday. Bannon decided today to put up a zero defense. I think that's a mistake. I'll tell you why. Anyway, we are likely to hear closing arguments today, and the jury will probably get the case today. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about California's gig economy, explain to you why that's a problem. And we're going to talk about Nancy's latest stunt. If we can get to Pompous Pete, we shall see. Sorry. Anyway, folks, January 6th, again, is going to have their final hearing tonight. It's the 8th in a series, and if I have been live streaming all of them. I've been writing a lot about it. I've read a lot of stuff about it. I'm easily one of the experts in the country about this, and I'm not exaggerating, because you have to know about the election of 1800. You have to know about the Electoral Count Act of 1887. You have to know about the 14th. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on here that you have to understand to know, and then you have to put all these things together. And that's one of the reasons they're able to get away with the show trial, because the average person doesn't have that type of knowledge to understand why they are basically just making a mountain out of a molehill. And I'm not kidding. I mean, folks, at the end of the day, what happened on January 6th, I don't care if you believe that that the feds had nothing to do with it. I don't care if you believe, and I don't believe the feds had nothing to do with it. I do believe it was a false flag operation. I don't care if you believe that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats otherwise refused to get additional security. Obviously, I believe they refused to get additional security. I think it was a setup from the beginning, and I think what we see now, the fact that the January 6th committee is going to close tonight and is never going to take any consideration of why there wasn't ample security to look into whether there was a false flag operation and whether there were feds there. Even if you don't believe that, which obviously I do. If you don't believe that, folks, at the end of the day, right, it got a little out of hand, and they were locked down for 4 hours, and then they came back, and the very challenge to the election, the certification of Joe Biden that Trump had set up with, even if you believe they're fake electors, folks. I mean, let's go from the left's point of view. Even if you think that the alternate states that sent 6 states sent alternate electors, even if you believe they're fake and they're false and that's a crime, right? It's still a molehill. It's 4.5 hours, and then Biden gets certified in the wee hours of the morning. The same way George W. Bush got certified in the wee hours of the morning because 2 Democrats decided to elect his certification. Folks, we had a bigger problem where during Trump's original inauguration, more people got arrested. So don't try to tell me there's something going on here. But again, because the media the media and the Democrats, and I repeat myself, I understand that, since they operate in this environment where they get to say whatever they want, and reality is whatever they say it is, they've managed to waste our time and our money and our folks. I mean, imagine, folks, think about this. All the effort, and you got to understand this, there's only so many things that you can do, right, in a day. You only have so much time. As Lincoln used to say, a lawyer's stock in trade is time, right, which is to mean be careful with your time. Be valuable. That's what you sell, and you can't print any more of it, right? You can be as brilliant as you want, but you've only got so much time. And the same thing for the government. The government's stock in trade in a lot of ways is time, right? So they've got Nancy's had the House, and we're going to talk about Nancy and when we get to contraception here, right? And they can only bring up so many bills. They can only investigate so many things. They can only think about so many improvements. And if you're spending all this time on January 6th and talking about Trump and fake protesting in front of the Supreme Court where you can get fake arrested, that's time that you're not spending solving actual problems, right? Like the fentanyl crisis in this country. And I could go on. You folks know. Anyway, so tonight they're going to focus on the 187 minutes that Donald Trump was not doing anything, supposedly. Again, I've covered this from the very beginning. They threw that in on the first night as one of the 7 things that they're trying to prove. They haven't really proved any of them except one. And so I'm now, I'm not going to, well, actually, you know what, I will for you YouTubers and you Rumble folks. I think I can bring this up. Let me bring up, where is it? Sorry, folks, this cold is hitting me a little harder than I thought. There. All right, so if you're on YouTube or Rumble, you can see this. So here are the items that the January 6th committee decided that they were going to try to prove. This has been updated all through the 7th hearing. So here are the items that they're going to try to prove against Trump. Trump caused the violence. I think they have proven this. Now, again, I'm setting aside false flags and things like that, but I think they've basically proven, you know, as Southerners in the Civil War, when the Yankees were down there, would ask them, you know, you don't own any slaves, why are you fighting? And they'd respond, I'm fighting because you're here. Right? It's the same idea. It's like Trump brought the people there. If they got out of control, it's his fault, right? You had a party. Your parents told you not to have a party. You had a party, and it wasn't your fault, but your friends tore up the house, right? I mean, you kind of brought him there. That's kind of, now, is that criminal? No. So it doesn't really get him anything. The second thing they're trying to show, Biden's certification is a coup or an insurrection. They haven't shown that. They can't show that because it's not. They're going to try. They haven't really tried to show that Trump incited the violence. They've made some passes at it. Right, but they haven't really done that. That's Brandenburg versus Ohio. They can't do it because legally, you got to have an immediate threat, which there was never an immediate threat. And then number 2, you've got to have some sort of nexus. He can't just say, we're going to burn this thing down. He's literally got to say, I'm going to meet you at 10 o'clock, and you bring the gas, I'll bring the matches, and we're literally, it's got to be specific. So they can't show that. This is number 4 on the list here for those of you on the YouTube and the Rumble. Trump was derelict in his duty on January 6th, okay? They're not going to be able to show that, and there's a lot of reasons why. One, they're going to sit there and they're going to say tonight, and they said before, that for 187 minutes, Trump did nothing. All right, there was 187 minutes between he learned of the violence and he finally made a statement. And they're also going to show, I like being fair, you know that several people urged Trump to do something. Hey, say something, tell him to get out. And they tried to show, I don't think they did, that as soon as Trump went out and tweeted, hey, y'all need to get out of there, they did. That's not enough to be derelict of duty for a variety of reasons, okay? First and foremost, folks, there is no such thing as dereliction of duty, all right? This is not a military man, right, who's been ordered to take that hill and then refused the orders of his superior to take his troops and try to take that hill and die trying. That's called dereliction of duty. It's a military term. I'm not saying it has no application in the government, but it might. I could think of certain situations where if I order the attorney general, right, to file a case or to prosecute this and the attorney general decides not to, that might be dereliction of duty. But folks, there's no statute for that. The remedy, if there is a dereliction of duty, with respect to a military man, there might be, but that's under the military code. Trump's not in the military. For the attorney general of the United States of America, it's to fire him. That's it. I mean, you can't, you're fired, and by the way, step over there and speak to Merrick Garland. He'll let you know about your arraignment and when it's going to come up. That's not the way any of this works. And when you get to the President of the United States, okay, it's even worse because there's only 2 ways to get rid of the President of the United States. And I don't care if people talk about the 25th Amendment or lying about the 25th Amendment. It's not what that means. The 25th Amendment is a temporary suspension, transfer of the privileges of the presidency for the president's health. Like, if I were to say, turns out I don't have a cold, or Lord forbid the vid, right? But I actually am having a heart attack, right? Then what they would do is they would invoke the 25th Amendment while I go get treatment for my heart attack. And then as soon as my heart is working again, I should get those powers back. Now, people have tried to lie to you about the 25th Amendment. There's 2 ways. The 25th Amendment is not one of them. 2 ways. Impeachment, or he doesn't win re-election again, or she, as the case may be, okay? That's it. There is no dereliction of duty. It's a waste of freaking time. Anyway, just so you know, finish the thread. The next thing they're trying to prove is Trump's not eligible for office under the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which provides that anybody who is shall engage in an insurrection or shall have provided aid and comfort. I mean, it's very broad to an insurrection, then you can't run. They haven't shown that. The other two are just kind of weird. And again, this has been amateur hour from the very beginning. I mean, it's been amateur hour that started off amateurish and got more amateurish. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. I mean, I remember watching Tiger Woods when he was an amateur golfer. I mean, he was fun to watch. He won. He's the first person to ever win 3 straight U.S. amateurs, which is the best amateur tournament in the world. I mean, the U.S. amateur is the one you want to win. And a lot of great golfers had won it twice, Nicklaus, for example. And Tiger, he's probably the reason he's the only one to win it 3 is because nobody else tried to do it. Like Nicklaus had won it twice, and he's like, yeah, I need to move on. Tiger has a lot of things. But anyway, I digress. The point I'm trying to make here is that when Tiger was an amateur, he played like an amateur in some ways. He made some mistakes. He did some things. As he went on in the process, he got better. The January 6th committee started as an amateur, and they're still an amateur. I mean, they just keep making mistakes everywhere. They can't help themselves. Sorry about that. Anyway, so the second to last thing they're trying to show, sorry about this cold, folks, is that Trump has some connection to the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys who had an independent insurrection plan. This one, I mean, the other ones, you can kind of understand kind of like where they're going, but they don't get there legally. This one, I don't even really understand it. It's just kind of a throw on, and this is very common, folks, in legal proceedings. It is very don't fool yourself. There are a lot of bad lawyers out there, a lot of bad presenters, and they seem to think that, hell, I'm just going to like accuse you of 20 things and then one of them will stick. That normally does not work for a variety of reasons, because first off, when you accuse somebody of 20 different things, people get confused. Number two, it's like, well, which is it? I mean, like I'll get these complaints and somebody say, well, you committed fraud. Well, if it wasn't fraud, it was breach of a contract. And I say, whoa, breach of a contract and fraud are very different. If I've got a fraud case, I don't throw in breach of contract. That's diminishing my claim. I'm saying you're a fraudulent person, right? And so there's a lot of inconsistencies. And then you also stretch yourself thin and you look weak. You're better off, even assuming they had 8 things. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7. Even if you had 7, you'd be much better off taking your top 3, your top 4, and then sprinkling those others there, here and there if you wanted to. I wouldn't have, but anyway, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The last one is Trump grifted Americans by raising campaign contributions for legal defense fund, which didn't exist, and he never spent the money on the lawsuits. That one, again, not really much to get into there. Doesn't make any sense. A lot of what they're doing doesn't make any sense, but it is what it is. So anyway, so tonight they're going to try to show that Trump was derelict in his duty for the 187 minutes. Let's listen to a few more of these other people so you get a flavor of what you're going to hear tonight, but it's going to be more of this, he wasn't doing anything. I've already pretty much told you why it doesn't work. I'll finish with one more thought after these people finish.
Talk to him on January 6th.
It's my understanding he was watching television.
When you were in the dining room in these discussions, was the violence happening visible on the screen on the television?
Yes. Right.
All right, so the last reason why it's not dereliction of duty is there's something called the business judgment rule out there, which is to say, again, I've already told you there's no dereliction of duty. Let's assume there was. Well, maybe Trump felt like, hey, if I just sit and let the authorities do their work, then maybe that's the best way to work out. Oh, I've been sitting here watching this for 187 minutes. I thought it would resolve itself. Turns out it hadn't resolved itself. So now I'm going to go out there and make a statement. Nothing wrong with that, folks. It has to be gross negligence, even if it were to rise to the level of failure of a breach or of a duty, and it doesn't. So anyway, nothing to see there, but probably doesn't surprise you. So here's a Twitter feed that I found that is doing a really good job of covering the Bannon trial. And so he had some updates on what's going on out there. I just wanted to let you know a couple things. And by the way, those of you listening on YouTube or your Rumble, yesterday I did a quick live stream on what you have to prove, breaking down the law and the facts of the Bannon case. It's about 10 minutes long. I highly recommend it. And so basically, the government has to show that Bannon willfully failed to comply with the subpoena. Now, this morning, I interacted with a few people on the YouTube that reacted to my video and said, no, it's really simple. He got the subpoena had a date, he didn't do what the subpoena said by the date, that's it, he's guilty. Folks, anybody who tells you that, and a lot of people in the mainstream media are saying that, they're telling you something that's not true. I don't know if they're lying or they're ignorant or both, and I don't care. That's called strict liability. There are very few things in the law that are strict liability. I've used this example before. We get new people all the time. So a good example of something that is strict liability in the law is statutory rape. There is no mental element at all. You either had sex with somebody that was below the legal age or you didn't. That's all the prosecutor need proof. You had sexual relations. This person, in fact, was under the age of consent at that time. Bingo, bango, you are now guilty. That's it, right? For there to be a rape of non-statutory, of course, it has a mental element. You have to intend to have sex with somebody knowing that they do not consent, right? So that's the big difference. This is not a strict liability statute. The government has tried a strict liability case. They basically, I'm going to explain that in a minute, but they basically just said, hey, we sent you the subpoena, you accepted service at 10 a.m. on the 7th, you didn't comply. At 10 a.m. on the 14th, you didn't comply. That's the end of the story. Now, that's just not right. Now, all that being said, Bannon has determined not to take the stand. He's determined not to present any witnesses, and he's currently right now arguing over technicalities. Now, this judge so far has not bitten on these technicalities. I can tell you I would have easily by now, and I'll tell you a reason why that I learned this morning. I did not know, but it's hard to get information because some people have the transcripts, but they're not sharing them, and then you have to rely on these other people on the Twitter. John Huey here, who we've got pulled up. We're going to pull him up in a second and talk about that. But I think Bannon should have taken the stand, and I think he should have taken the stand to talk about what I talked about in the live stream yesterday. If you want to go check it out, it's longer. But the gist of it is, folks, no one has ever understood subpoenas to be an agreed upon date unless you did agree upon a date. So if Benny Thompson had called Bannon and said, hey, Bannon, what date do you avail? Oh, the 7th. Oh, okay. When can you sit for your dep? Oh, the 14th. Okay, no problem. And then sent the subpoena. Hey, pursuant to our agreement, here are the dates. Maybe. But he sent just a subpoena with a cover letter that said, hey, do this. And so nobody in his right mind would have understood that to be a strict date. So I don't think you can prove under that factual scenario that a person was willful, right? Especially if Bannon doesn't take the stand himself. So I understand that's why he's not taking the stand, because you have no evidence of my mental state without me not being there. I disagree with that. I think a lot of defense lawyers tell people not to take the stand, and they are just wrong. Jurors want to look you in the eye. They want to see you look them in the eye. It's important that you show up, that you look nice, that you look presentable, that you are respectful, right? And look them in the eye and say, look, I thought, they meant they put those dates down there because they have to have dates in there. I understand from my lawyer, from my experience, that this is something that's negotiated. I apologize. My lawyer was tardy in getting that, response to them. But, basically, they were even willing to work with me afterwards for a few days, and we couldn't come to an agreement. Next thing I know, people are knocking on my door reading me my rights. I think that's what he should have done. He decided not to do that. We shall see what happens. I still think under any fair jury, he should be found not guilty. So anyway, here's the other thing I wanted you to know about the Bannon trial that I think you need to know from, let's see here, from Shuey. Where is it? It's very important if I get to it right. Yeah. Sure it is right here. So Kokorian, Bannon's defense lawyer, if Thompson were here or was here, we would have presented evidence to the jury that he was not the author of those letters, so they were not, in fact, an official position of the select committee. So it turns out, folks, that the government, and I did not realize this, the government sent basically the attorney that testimony at the trial proved she actually drafted the subpoena. And then she walked in and she had Benny Thompson sign it. We looked at it in the live stream, and I may have done something on the show this week. I can't remember. But anyway, Benny Thompson signed it. So, the fact that Benny Thompson isn't there is a problem for the government. And it's a problem for the government for this. How are we to know? If I'm a juror and I'm sitting here, again, Bannon's not going to take the stand. I think that's a mistake. But had he taken the stand and said, look, this is what I understood it to be, and I wasn't willfully not complying, had I known that they were going to haul me off to the pokey because I didn't show up on the 7th, I sure would have been there and just raised my objections, and then I'd be out of this. I do think it is a good point to bring up. Look, Benny Thompson issued the subpoena. This woman didn't. So she's the only person that's shown up. If Benny Thompson's not here to say, here's what I understood it to be, I understood it to be the 7th and only the 7th and nothing but the 7th. I understood it to be the 14th and nothing but the 14th. that'd be fine. But I think Bannon's defense lawyers have a pretty good argument in here. Now, here's the problem. They're making it as a Rule 29 motion, which means they're trying to get the judge to dismiss the case over this, and he's already shown a propensity not to do that. So I don't think it's going to work out too well for Bannon there. But we shall see. There is good news out there, and that is that the judge, either because and again, it's a Trump appointee, but he apparently felt so hamstrung that he basically limited very little to what Trump or to what Bannon could put in, which I think was a mistake. And so I think he's got good grounds for appeal. And the other thing we've been talking about for a while on the show is, the Democrats have just gone so far over the deep end at this point. That's why you're seeing the Supreme Court come in and step in. I mean, if they would just keep it in the road and stop acting crazy, what in the world? And stopped acting crazy, I think we'd have a pretty good situation where you might not see some of these rulings. But again, you don't need to railroad Bannon. I mean, if you really wanted Bannon's testimony, you could have worked with him. And again, I think it would have been more powerful to work with him and say, come on, I know we're not being, pain in the butt about the dates, Mr. Bannon, but, you really need to get in here in the next month or so. And if you don't, you're going to tie our hands. We're going to have to refer you to the DOJ. We don't want to, but this whole idea that when he didn't show up on the 14th and they sent a letter or two back, and by the 18th, they're referring him to the DOJ. I mean, they're just begging the Supreme Court to take this up and quash it, which, frankly, they should, just because this is really an abuse of power. But anyway, so a couple other things, and we're going to finish the show well early today. One, I'm not the I feel cheated crowd. Please, you're not cheated. There's really not a whole lot going on. You're pretty much all caught up to date right now, frankly, when I've covered Bannon and January 6th, because that's all anybody wants to talk about right now. But yesterday, the House voted to pass a bill to guarantee access to contraception. Now, it might surprise you that such a bill would be needed, since no state in the union currently bans access to contraception. Now, you might think, well, it's interesting, because I listen to shows like The Great American Male, and so I'm aware of the Constitution, and I'm also aware of the Dobbs's recent decision from the Supreme Court. What authority does Congress have to regulate contraception? And you'd be right. They'd have zero police power to do that. So again, it's another virtue signaling nonsense bill, but let's pull up CNN and let's see how CNN covered this, because when the Democrats act this way, they wouldn't act this way if you had a media that looked at this and said, hey, Pelosi, A, you don't have the authority. B, no state's doing this. C, it's currently the law of the land, right, that states can't do anything with contraception. So anyway, and or Nancy, when you're like focusing on the Right to Contraception Act, what are you doing about gas prices, and what are you doing about inflation, and what are you doing about improving the lives of people, even if you believe in this climate change nonsense or something? No, let's see what CNN does. Let's give, because I haven't read this whole article. I just skimmed it. I just want to pick one. House votes to pass bill guaranteeing access to contraception. The House voted Thursday to pass a bill that would guarantee access to contraception by protecting the right to buy and use contraceptives without government restriction. Okay, all right. The final vote was 228 to 195. By quick math, that sounds like 8 Republicans voted with them. 8 Republicans crossed over to vote with Democrats. Let's see who they were. Liz Cheney, not a Republican. Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Fred Upton of Michigan. Anthony Gonzalez of Ohio. John Katko of New York. Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. Maria Salazar of Florida. And Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, not a Republican, joined all the Democrats to vote for the bill. 2 Republicans, Bob Gibbs of Ohio and Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania, voted present, which means they took no position on the bill. The vote falls among action House Democrats are trying to take following the Supreme Court's decision overturned Roe v. Wade. In that discussion, Clarence Thomas wrote separately in a concurring opinion that the High Court should reconsider substantive due process precedents in decisions, including Griswold versus Connecticut, that allows access to contraception. This is an uninformed reporter. That's not what he meant. He just said it's not substantive due process. What Clarence Thomas is saying, he thinks it's equal protection, right? But again, these people can't be bothered to actually get anything right. So the Right to Contraception Act introduced by so-and-so. Okay, the White House said it strongly supports. Okay, whatever. Earlier this week, the House passed a bill enshrining protection of same-sex marriage. Okay, all right. The story and the headline have been updated with additional developments Thursday. Okay, so our media isn't going to basically hold our leaders' feet to the fire about anything. So we're going to get more of that, folks. So again, we're headed in the wrong direction, and we're picking up speed. Thank you for nothing, mainstream media. All right, so here's a story I caught, and I thought this was interesting. I did not know about this, but one of the biggest things that happened to this country And when you go to the store or you go fill up your tank and you're wondering why you're paying more for everything you buy, right? Everything. I mean, I recently had a few purchases. I made some, and some were made on my behalf for my recent birthday. And understand everything that was bought for me, or I bought, probably paid 10% or 15% more than it would have been for my 43rd birthday. Think about that. 10%, right? Or more. That's a lot. And that's everywhere. And, it's hard to realize that, but it's true, all right? And part of the reason for that was these 2 Senate seats that we lost because of the whole election debacle. And I do blame President Trump for part of that, because I think he should have, just let the election stuff rest for a while so we could have the election down here. I think a lot of people didn't show up because of that. But anyway, and as a result of that, the House very quickly bailed out Illinois, New York, and the other blue states, right? So the blue states are in free fall. California is among them. And one of the reasons you don't see the free fall is that the federal government was able to print a bunch of money and give it to them. So anyway, this story caught my eye because it's out of California. And this is, again, folks, this is the consequence of these policies that don't make any sense, okay? Trucker protest over gig worker law shuts down operations at California port. The truckers have been protesting Assembly Bill 5, a gig economy law passed in 2019 that made it harder for companies to classify workers as independent contractors instead of employees who were entitled to a minimum wage and benefits such as overtime and sick pay. All right, you basically heard all it is. Truckers are typically independent contractors, which means they get paid a salary and then they have to do their own taxes. Why is California doing this? Because governments hate small business. They hate independent contractors. They want you working for a big company so they can control you, and they get more tax revenue, they believe, because you have to pay more into Social Security because your employer chips in and all this stuff. This is a leftist wet dream, is to get rid of all independent contractors and have everybody be a W-4 employee, right? Now, this is the problem with these policies. They don't make any sense, right, at all, and people push back against them. And apparently the port of Oakland has now been shut down for 3 straight days because of protests. So in the middle of a supply chain crisis, we're going to have more of this. Now, ultimately, this will shake out, and these people will stop wanting to go to California, stop wanting to work in California, right? But again, it just goes to show you these people that are governing now, they think, oh, we're just going to pass the, Uniform Access to Contraception Act, and we're going to pass the, No More Cavities Act, and cavities are magically going to go away, right? And they don't ever have to deal with the consequences, and they never have a media explain to them the consequences of their actions. But you always have to understand this. Democrats detest small business, and they detest independent contractors, all of that. They think the government should be involved in everything. And so this is not to protect the workers. I mean, that's what they're going to claim. Oh, well, you would get overtime if you were an employee. They would pay half of your Social Security if you were an employee. And you got all these truckers out there protesting going, I don't want this. I'm protesting this bill. Exempt us from this. We don't want it. Oh, no, you don't know what's good for you. We'll tell you. So Pompous Pete's been out there making the rounds for the green energy. And so this one I didn't get to play. I had it in the can. I thought today, since I got plenty of time, I'd be able to play it. So take a listen to this one. And this is what Pete Buttigieg thinks of you. Pompous Pete, believe me, this is what he thinks about you. And again, this guy, I don't know how old he is. He's got to be early 40s, late 30s, right? And he seems to be the kind of person you give him a number 2 pencil and it's over. But these people that are really, really intelligent, a lot of times don't have any common sense at all. Anyway, this is what he thinks of us.
I'm still astonished that some folks, and I felt this, I was testifying in Congress yesterday, some folks seem to really struggle to let go of the status quo. I'm still...
Yeah, so we're struggling to let go of the status quo, folks. I mean, we still would prefer the old horse and buggy. That's what we want. I mean, fossil fuels, we just won't get on with this electric energy thing. And folks, the reason I wanted to make sure you heard that is, I mean, I want you to understand, the Green New Deal is nothing but a grift and a hoax. But let's assume for the sake of the argument, you think, no, Great American Male, a lot of times you're fancy talk, you say a lot of good things, but this time you're just wrong. We really do need to do something for the planet. Okay, fine. Let's assume you're right and I'm wrong. Let's concede that for the sake of the argument, okay? Fine. You don't have to be arrogant and pompous and condescending about it. You can just say, look, we don't agree, but this is what we have to do, and we're in the government, and this is what we're going to do. But this is the type of person that gets into government when you have the environment that we have today. Somebody like Pompous Pete, somebody like Joe Biden, somebody that goes around and is unembarrassed by the fact that his son is, picking up bottles of cash here, there, and everywhere, right? That's the kind of, and is in your face about it. Those moments when we play on the show where Biden gets asked a question by a reporter or somebody screams something out and he goes over and gets in their face, that's who he really is. This is who Pete Buttigieg really is, folks, all right? And never forget that. They're going to enrich their friends and steal your freedoms, right? And you're going to like it, right? And they're going to talk down to you. So here's the last thing I wanted to cover today. And you basically are all caught up with the news of the day at this point. But so I saw this article in my Twitter feed. Former Trump White House aide who met with January 6 panel attacks witnesses lawmakers in profane and sexist rant. Okay. Anyway, this is Jake Tapper. He is talking about a witness who, worked for Trump, finally came in to talk to the January 6th committee. And so I just was curious, what he had to say. Let's take a listen and break it down. And before, I want you to understand, again, 60% of Americans, and I think it's more than that, but 60% of Americans don't read past the headline. So apparently, if you read the headline and you don't listen to this, you will think the aide went on a profane and sexist rant. Let's take a listen.
Audio circulating from a former Trump White House aide who ranted about his meeting with the January 6th committee yesterday. The aide, Garrett Ziegler, went on a live stream suggesting that the January 6th investigation is an attempt to go after white Christians.
They're Bolsheviks, so they probably do hate the American founders and most white people in general. This is a Bolshevistic anti-white campaign. If you can't see that, your eyes are freaking closed. And so they see me as a young Christian who they can try to basically scare, right?
A Bolshevist anti-white campaign going against Christians. Mask off. Now, it might be tempting to compare Donald Trump to Shoichi Yokoi, the Japanese sergeant discovered hiding in the jungles of Guam.
Anyway, folks, he has this opinion. He thinks the January 6th committee, he thinks the people that are running it are Bolsheviks, is basically communists, and that communists don't like white Christian capitalists. I happen to know that that's true, right? And we covered yesterday on the show all these things where it's fine for them to attack people that are white, right, and to favor people that are non-white, right? But again, Jake Tapper acts like people that say that are crazy, Anyway, the other thing about it is, what was sexist about that rant? I didn't hear anything sexist. I mean, all he talked about was the fact that you're going after me because I'm a white Christian capitalist. But anyway, so I just thought it was important to keep in mind. I mean, they come and they call out people, and then they misrepresent what they say, and then they never look and take at the other side. In other words, it's very similar to the idea that they accuse us of that which they're doing, right? Anyway, you're now all caught up to the date. And if you enjoyed this live stream, I hope you tune back in tomorrow.